Hi, this video here is a video that I've been wanting to do for a while. Excuse me, I'm getting settled in here. Yeah, I wanted to do this video for a while. And it deals with people living in Seattle and how Seattle is disproportionate. Uh, there's some in Seattle that can dictate the prices of everything in the whole city. It says here that in Seattle, um, in order to afford a particular style of apartment or a particular apartment, well, one must work for a one bedroom. They're saying that you've got to work on a minimum wage, that you've got to work at least 75 hours a week. 75 hours a week just to be able to afford to get by in Seattle. And they're saying that a minimum wage worker in the state of Washington must work 93 hours a week to afford a two-bedroom apartment. So, like, if you're a single parent and you live in Seattle and you're working minimum wage, you have to work almost 100 hours a week, almost 100 hours a week in order to make it and have a two-bedroom apartment if you've got kids. That's what they're saying. Now here it says the day after Seattle City Council repealed a tax that would have funded low-income housing, a new report highlights the ongoing lack of affordable housing for the nation's lowest income renters. When it says the lowest income renters, they're talking about, hopefully they're talking about the ones that are making 20,000 and under, but I don't think so. It says here, despite the state and city minimum wage increases, nowhere in the United States can a full-time minimum wage worker afford a two-bedroom apartment. Well, you can. It depends. If you want to live in a rinky-dink town down in the south, southern United States, yeah, you can find apartments relatively cheap there. If you want to live in a rinky-dink area, but you're not going to make very much money down there. It says, despite state and city minimum wage increases, nowhere in the United States can a full-time minimum wage worker afford a two-bedroom apartment, according to a new report from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. Each year, the group's Out of Reach report calculates the gap between the cost of rent and how much the renters make. The report uses the minimum wage when renter, the report uses minimum wage, mean renter wage, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Now, I don't know what mean renter wage is. I'll have to look that up. But it says here in the Department of Housing and Urban Development's definition of fair market rent. To define affordability, it uses the industry standard by spending no more than 30% of income on rent. Increasingly, households across the country spend 50% or more of their income on housing, making them severely cost burdened. Here in Washington, now, like in the state of Washington, if you were to live in Seattle and the area median income is 100 grand for that particular area that you're in, and you're able to get an apartment for 30% of the area median income. Now, they're not saying 30% of your income, they're saying 30% of the area median income. So if it's 100 grand, how much is 30% of 100 grand? And can you afford it? Especially if you're on disability, making $771 a month, minus whatever the state might decide to give you. And especially if you're working now, if it's 30% of your income, then that's different. But it's usually 30% of the area median income. Now it says here in Washington, workers need to make $19 an hour to afford a studio apartment. That's in the state of Washington. Now, there's probably some places in the state of Washington, if you really, really looked hard, you could find an apartment for very cheap because it's a very rinky-dink town. Not all of the state of Washington is high pollutant like Seattle or Tacoma or Bellevue or any of those other places. Now, it says here, that's for a studio apartment, you got to be making $19 an hour. Now, it says here 22 for a one-bedroom. 27 for a two-bedroom, and 39 for a three-bedroom. In the Seattle Bellevue metro area in King County, the numbers are higher. 26 an hour for a studio, 29 for a one-bedroom, and 36 for a two-bedroom, and 52 for a three-bedroom. You got to make at least $52 an hour for a three-bedroom. Now, what they're counting on, and I can almost bet you this, what they're counting on when they do that, they're counting on people that are living in Seattle that go out drinking every night, that spend at least $100 a night on drinks when they're there. They're drinking every night. They're going to fancy places to buy their clothes. They're going out to eat every night. So they've got an awful lot of nightlife that is part of their lifestyle. Now, me, I don't do much. I'm 52 years old. I'll be 53 in June. I don't really do a whole lot with my life. I go out to dinner occasionally. I cook at home. My utilities are very low because I'm in a very, very small studio apartment where I live at. My rent is only $445 a month. I'm not on Section 8. I don't get a third of the income knocked off. This is what I'm paying for a 284 square foot apartment where I am at. But I am one of the fortunate ones that was able to find rent that was this inexpensive in a town where usually a studio apartment is $1,000 a month. It says here, in contrast though, the state minimum wage is currently $11.50 per hour. That will increase to $13.50 by 2020. Okay, well, it's already increased in Seattle to $15 an hour. It says here in Seattle, the minimum wage currently ranges from $11.50 to $15 an hour, depending on the size of the employer and the benefits offered. Calculated another way, those housing costs mean a worker making Washington's current minimum wage would need to work 75 hours a week to afford a one-bedroom apartment. If you wanted a one-bedroom and you're in Seattle, you'd have to work 75 hours out of that week. Now, I'm not for sure exactly how many hours are in a week. Hold on, let me look it up. Bing is my new friend. It's not going to let me go there. So, there we go. Bing is my new friend. Okay. There's 168 hours in a week. If you had to work 75 hours, 168 minus 75 equals, you have 93 hours left over out of a week if you work 75 hours. Okay, 93 divided by the 7 equals, that's out of the day you have approximately 13 hours. No. Yeah, 13 hours. You have 93 hours left out of the day. You have 13 hours, which means that's 13 hours total out of the day for you to relax, for you to sleep, for you to eat, for you to exercise and do other things that you may do. But if you're on minimum wage, chances are you're struggling anyway. You're not going to make it. So that screws that idea. Okay. Okay, for someone in need of a two-bedroom, like a single parent with a child, which I mentioned earlier, you're going to need to work 93 hours per week, which means that that 93 hours that you had left over is not going to be 93 hours left over to spend it with your family. Compared to other states, Washington ranks as the 8th most expensive state for a two-bedroom apartment. Hawaii is first, California is second. The report also looks at the mean wage for renters. Since many people make more than the minimum wage, still the results are bleak. The mean Washington renter makes $19 an hour according to the report. I guess mean means middle of the road, I guess, like between poor and rich. In Seattle, Bellevue, it's 24, and across King County, it's 25. Even at those wages, it would take 52, even at those wages, it would take 57 hours a week to afford statewide rent for a two-bedroom apartment. In Seattle, a worker making the mean wage would have to put in 49 hours for a one-bedroom and 60 hours for a two-bedroom. The report recommends federal investments in programs like public housing, voucher, and rental assistance. It doesn't have to be like that. I'm telling you, in Seattle, you could really change things for the better if you would just get off your lazy ass, put your foot down, and do something. In a preface to the report, Senator Bernie Sanders writes that wages have been stagnant for decades while the cost of housing keeps going up. That's true. Wages have stayed here and the cost of living keeps going up. The more you make, this is the thing, and a lot of people don't understand this. The more you want to make, the more it's going to cost for the product. The more you want to make per hour, the more the company is going to have to charge for that product. If McDonald's got more than their fair, if they got too much money, they would have to take off the dollar menu to recoup their cost, because the CEOs are not going to take it out of their own pocket. They're not going to lose money. They're not. They're just not going to do it. It says here, in America today, nearly 11 million families pay more than half of their limited incomes toward rent and utilities. So basically, the rich don't want us to, they want us to be bogged down with nothing but bills. If they make the rent so high that we can't afford it, and they make the price of everything so high that we can't afford it, they can enjoy America, and the rest of us can't. I know that's a bleak way to end this video, but that's the way I'm going to do it. It costs that much for people to be able to live in Seattle, and that's just minimum wage. That's why a lot of people aren't talking about minimum wage and poor people, because they know that it's better, or it's more glamorous to talk about the rich, Fraser Cranes of the world. Anyway, have a good night, Seattle, and all points beyond.